All right, I want to welcome everybody to the January Curriculum Director meeting. And we have three special topics today. We are going to be talking about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with a segment on guaranteed and viable. So we're going to be talking with curriculum first. And guaranteed and viable is a term that I think that we've all heard and experienced. And from what I can tell, that was coined by Marzano. And we're going to go ahead and jump into kind of what does it mean. So we have the why, the how, and the what about guaranteed and viable. And so in his book, Marzano talks about, well, he has a lot of books, but in the one I'm referencing, talks about this, that there was this research study done about the opportunity to learn. And one of the strongest factors that the school can control in this whole concept of opportunity to learn is that if the kids have the opportunity to learn, then they're going to be able to have that student achievement. So more than poverty level factors, more than a lot of those out of school factors, of all the things that the school can control, that opportunity to learn is very important. And one of the main factors that the school can control about that opportunity to learn is this idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And they're not the only ones that have said this. The Dufors have talked about this quite a bit. Mike Schmoker has talked about this quite a bit. So there's a lot of research behind this idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So I wanted to set up some operational definitions here. So guaranteed means that every student is provided with the opportunity to learn a core curriculum, which provides them with the probability of success in school. So that's that guaranteed part. Every student has this opportunity to learn. And then on the viable side, it's really about time. So if we need to make the time and we need to protect that time so that the students will be able to learn that guaranteed curriculum. So we could have the best written curriculum in the world, but if we do not establish the correct time allocations, then the students aren't going to be able to get that. And the other part of viable there is that the content and the skills can be taught and learned. And he kind of juxtaposes that with not rushed and covered, right? Within the timeframes that are available during the academic year. So there's really this big emphasis on time. So guaranteed means that all the kids can get it, and viable means that we've actually set the time aside for them to be able to do so. So just to dig a little bit further into this whole concept about time, really it is the time to make that curriculum and to prepare and to instruct and assess. So time in a lot of different places. And I think I know that as a consultant at the ISD, time is the biggest barrier that we see whenever we're trying to work with staff regarding any piece of this, but especially when it comes to curriculum work. We have to find the time to get people together. We have to find the subs to cover them, or we need to find the funds to pay them to work outside of their normal school day. So big barrier here is time. And that's on the staff side. It's really similar with students as well. Students need the adequate time to then receive, process, and retain that information. So not just the coverage that was mentioned previously. And so what that viable curriculum means is that the standards, the pacing guides, the daily instruction, it's all manageable and it can be realistically taught to mastery in the instructional year. And one of the things that I talk about with every district that I work with when we're working on curriculum is that the main thing that you can do with a written curriculum is narrow down all of the different resources that you have. So when we buy a curricular resource, they put everything in the kitchen sink and the garbage disposal into it because they're trying to cover every possible facet of what could happen in the world. And so when we translate that into a written curriculum, oftentimes what we're doing is we're changing it from this much information to the actual amount of information that's manageable for us and realistic to be taught in a year. So there are some identified specific components that make up a written curriculum. And so I have those listed here. And this is a little bit of a combination of what Marzano talks about, some pieces from Mike Schmoker, and also what is looked for in an on-site review from the Michigan Department of Education. And so this is what makes up a written curriculum. One is that you're able to pace out everything that's happening for the year into various units. And we're able to connect those unit plans to what standards are being taught. And those standards are really translated into essential questions or learning targets that are easy for the teachers, the kids, and the families to understand. And then finally, we have those curricular resources. So what are we using then to teach this curriculum? And those curricular resources are often made up of some sort of purchased text, but not always. Sometimes we have district created things or ISD created things. And then often we have to supplement those resources with other pieces if they don't cover exactly what it is that we're looking for. Within all of that, we need to identify what the essential vocabulary is that the students will need to be successful with what they're learning. And then finally, how are we going to assess that what we put into place was effective? So a written curriculum is going to contain all of these components. And if we don't have all of those components, then we're really going to be leaving something out that's really important to be able to meet the goals that we have for our students. Besides this whole idea of what's researched and all that sort of things, there's actually a lot of practical reasons to have a written curriculum. And one of the main ones, kind of from an instructional standpoint, is that we actually have some sort of consensus around what it is that we're teaching and what we want to use to teach it. So when I was a principal, one of the things, first things that I did when I got to Whitehall was we really worked on making a guaranteed viable curriculum for our kids. Teachers were using different resources. There wasn't really a common plan for how to do that. And it actually made collaboration very difficult because there wasn't this centralized thing to go back to for us to collaborate around. Collaboration was difficult. And when we started to get aligned, when we started to learn about and use the same resources and be in about the same place with those resources, it gave us all kinds of things to collaborate around. We could talk about the difficulties we were having when we were putting in place. We could talk about the successes. We could compare student assessment results. So from an instructional standpoint, it's a very practical thing to have a written curriculum that everybody is working from. The next piece kind of under that is talking about measuring if we're teaching what we think is important and if the kids are learning it. Again, if you're lacking a written curriculum, there's nothing to go back to say, did we teach the things that we wanted to teach? It just becomes much looser. And again, it really is hard for us to collaborate around that to make sure that we're hitting those pieces and assessing the students to know if they learned it. If they didn't learn it and we didn't follow a written curriculum, it's hard to understand and try to make meaning about why they had difficulty learning that. So beyond those instructional reasons, there's also just a lot of other practical things. When someone is newly hired and moves into your building, it is a wonderful thing to say, here's our written curriculum, and have them follow that. After we had developed the curriculum that we had at Whitehall, we had a 5th grade teacher that moved to kindergarten. And so I'm not sure if there's anybody here that ever moved from 5th grade to kindergarten, but it's quite a leap. It was really, for her, she came to me after the first month and she said, this was so much easier than I thought it would be, because when I came here, I knew exactly what I had to teach. I knew exactly what the resources were. I knew the amount of time I was supposed to be spending on it. And I've been able to collaborate with all the other people in the grade level. So that piece about someone moving to a new grade level, if you're at the elementary, or maybe a new department or course, if you're at the secondary, if everything is documented, then it gives them that really clear guide about where they should be with things. The last thing that I would say is it was also really helpful for long-term subs, in that if someone were to come in You might have somebody that didn't even have elementary experience, or maybe didn't even have secondary experience, or they might be coming from the business world, or those sorts of things. And so having someone come in from a long-term sub and have those pieces there for those reasons mentioned previously is extraordinarily helpful. So the last thing that I would say about the practical reasons is it's a requirement to have a written curriculum in order for you to receive your federal funds. So this is the joke that I put in the agenda. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. It will be a finding, let's just put it that way, when you have an on-site review, if you are not able to show your guaranteed and viable written curriculum that has all of the components that we talked about. So I wanted to show you something out of the schools and district study guides for an on-site review. So as we all know, we have a written process database that has all of our written processes in it. Within that, I have copies of the district study guide and the school study guide. So I'm just pulled up the district study guide, and there are 2 questions that they ask, and they are the very first 2 questions that they ask. And there's several people on here that had an on-site review in the last 4 years. And you can back me up on this, that these were the first 2 questions that they asked when they came to your district meeting. They said, how do you effectively communicate your written curriculum to all of your instructional staff? And then the second question was, how do you make sure that the instruction is aligned to that core academic curriculum? And in all of the on-site reviews that I've been to since I started here, none of the districts have been able to adequately answer that when the on-site review happens. And that was a finding for them, and they spent countless hours since putting their written curriculums together. And we actually have some testimonial about that we'll hear in a few minutes. So then we have our school study guide. So if you have an on-site review, they come to your district and they ask you a bunch of questions, and then they go to one or more of your schools and ask a bunch of questions. And the very first questions they're going to ask when they go to your school: does your school have a core academic curriculum that's aligned to the state standards? Does your core academic instruction, provided all students, align with the core academic curriculum? And is all of your student assessment that you're providing to students aligned to your core academic curriculum? So it's not just that research is saying that we should be doing it, not just the practical reasons that we should be doing it. These will be findings when you have your on-site review, and it is a requirement for you to have a written curriculum if you're going to receive federal funds. So I see a couple of things in the chat. Just want to jump in and make sure that we're getting some confirmation that yes, that is what they ask for when they come in for on-site reviews. Next thing I want to talk about is this idea of intended curriculum, enacted curriculum, and attained curriculum. And a lot of times when I'm having conversations with people, I do hear those words intended and enacted. And but oftentimes I don't hear people talk about the attained curriculum. So the intended curriculum is, if we do have a written curriculum, it's what's written down. And then the enacted curriculum then is what's actually taught. And then the attained curriculum is what is actually learned. And so this this little graphic of that total alignment would be if the intended curriculum was what was enacted and what was actually attained. And more often than not, you will get some version of that 3-part Venn diagram that's in the middle, right? Hey, we wrote this down, but you know, there were 4 days of snow days, and so we had to make some compromises to what our written down curriculum was so that we could kind of get through that. Or, you know, we taught it, but the kids didn't learn it to what we thought we would be able to do. But time's a factor, and we need to continue to move on, right? So you might get some sort of situation. I think the middle situation is what's probably going to be more likely. I put this one on the left to show kind of what happens when you don't have a written curriculum. So we are going in and our teachers are enacting something every day, whether we have a written curriculum or not. And the kids are learning something every day, whether we have a written curriculum or not. And so this graphic is really kind of here to show what does it kind of look like if we don't even have a written curriculum. Well, something is happening in the classrooms every day. We may not have a really good handle on what that is. And the kids are learning something, but again, we might not have as good a handle on that if we're not able to collaborate around it the way that we might if we had a written curriculum. And I do have, there's a graphic here that I wanted to show that kind of sums up everything that we've talked about so far. It's linked in the agenda where it says graphic, Marzano into 4. And so this really kind of does that why, how, and what target, kind of like that Simon Sinek has made famous. And so the middle here is our why, then we have our how, and the outside is the what. And much like what Simon Sinek talks about, what we often will do in schools is we'll jump straight to the what. And we'll say, okay, it's time for a new curriculum adoption. So what book are we going to buy, or what series are we going to buy? And we didn't start at the middle and think about what do we want to have as our guaranteed viable written curriculum. So I think that this is a really great visual that kind of captures all the different things that we've shared so far today. So I think, as some people can attest that have been through the process, that if we're doing it correctly, it really is a forever process. The hard work is completed up front when we're getting that initial curriculum created, and it takes multiple years. Again, as we're going to hear from Robin, Robin's going to present here in a minute. It takes multiple years typically to get that written curriculum really well established. And then from there, it becomes a reflective process. So this is usually completed at like the PLC level or the grade level or the department level, or some other protected time for that, late start Wednesdays, early release Fridays, that sort of thing. And it starts to really give some great conversation pieces for everybody. So we can, the groups can start to have these conversations. Did my pacing line up with a curriculum map? And a lot of people feel like when they first start this, that it's a gotcha. Well, I wasn't able to do this, but so-and-so was. But it really boils down to then what happens at the PLC. What kind of conversations can you have around that? Was the map off? Does it actually take longer to do this stuff? And so you can actually think about, do we need to update the maps? Do the maps need to change? We weren't able to do this in 10 days. It took 15 days and it has for 2 years. So we need to adjust our curriculum maps and our pacing overall. If there's one person that's having trouble with it and 6 other people are able to make it happen, then what kind of support might that person need to get that done? Is there some sort of, is there coaching that can happen? Can she come in or he observe the other teachers? So it really starts to open up all kinds of opportunities for collaboration, and it doesn't mean the strict adherence to the written plan. The written plan might need to be updated as well. So what kind of adjustments do we need to make? These are a few items that I know that I hear when I work with districts on curriculum. The first one is kind of typically more of a secondary response that I get. Well, didn't we buy our curriculum when we bought the textbook? And so like we talked about earlier, the curricular resource is just one piece of a written curriculum. And the textbook has everything in it in the kitchen sink, and you're not going to be able to make it through the whole textbook in a year. So it's really all about like, what is the important piece? What are the things that we want to teach, and why do we want to teach them? What's the time frame that we're going to teach them in? That's typically what I hear from secondary people. What I typically hear from elementary people is really the second one, that it sounds too lockstep. And I'm supposed to be, I teach kindergarten. I'm supposed to be on the same page of the same book at the same day that the teacher next to me is on. And much like we talked about on the last slide, that's not really what we mean by this. It really gives you that baseline to collaborate around. And it really gets into what are we supposed to teach? How can we guarantee to all the parents, no matter which kindergarten class that they go into, that they're going to get the same high level instruction with the same high level materials. And then it gives us something to collaborate around as professionals. Then one's really about time. When can we possibly get it done, and how can we keep it up, and how and where is it all kept? Really, it takes a long time to do this. It often takes release time, summer work time, professional learning communities time, late start time, professional development day time. It just takes time to do it. And that time needs to be protected and set aside. And so it really becomes an organizational issue about when is that time going to happen. And then where do we keep it and how do we keep up on it? And again, both of those are organizational issues. There are a lot of different ways to do this. There are products that you can buy that help with it, and several of our districts do that. We have districts that maintain this in Google Docs. And so Robin's going to share an example of that. I'm actually working with Oak Ridge right now, and they're going to be trying a new product. I was hoping that Tom could be here today to share about that. But we're just getting started with it, but I'm excited to kind of share how that's going as we get a little bit farther into it. So, I just did also want to mention that we do have a developed process here at the ISD that can be led by our ISD content consultants around how to adopt a curricular resource. And we tried to be purposeful around the language with that. We're not adopting a curriculum. The curriculum needs to be written by the professionals in the district, as we've talked about. But a part of your written curriculum may be your curriculum resource that you want to use with that. And we have a process for how to adopt those curricular resources. We have been able to pilot that at a couple of different districts. And we feel like that we're ready to kind of expand the use of that. And so if you're in the market or starting to think about, do we need to update our curricular resources, then I suggest reaching out to one of whatever the content consultant is for the subject that you're looking at. Just wanted to put out there that we do have a process developed right here at the ISD, and we've been able to put that into place, and look forward to doing that with more of our districts. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Robin and to talk about a little bit about her experiences with some of the things that we talked about with on-site reviews and how she responded to that.
All right, thanks, David. So just a little bit of curriculum background, as you can see on the slide here. Way back in the 1990s, we did purchase and kind of adopt the KC4 curriculum. And that was kind of what we were using. That we also were involved in a Title I on-site review back in the late 90s. We're not quite sure of the date because that was never finished. The person who was leading that on-site review for us was relocated to the UP, and then it just kind of went away and nobody ever came to finish it. And we just kind of flew under the radar for a very, very, very long time. When they did the update of the KC4, we did not purchase the update. And so what happened is our kind of written documented curriculum just eventually disappeared. There really wasn't any accountability. There was really nothing that anybody went by. You know, when the core standards came out, or the Common Core standards came out, everybody's like, oh, well, you know, we have a curriculum and we teach the Common Core standards. And we're like, that's not really a curriculum. We had a lot of issues with, you know, everybody was kind of doing their own thing. Nobody was doing anything, you know, with any kind of commonality at all. It was probably most evident at our elementary, where, you know, you'd have 3 different sections of a grade level, and there was no guarantee that anything was happening. I mean, they were teaching some of the basic things, but, you know, at different times, you know, and some things maybe were getting covered and others weren't. And it was just kind of a free for all, if you would. We actually then were scheduled for an on-site review in November of 2018. And we knew going in that we were not, when that very first question asked, you know, would be asked, you know, show us your written curriculum. We knew that the answer to that was going to be, we don't have one. And so we were very honest and upfront with Shelley Patton on that. and her team. And of course, that became one of the very major findings for the MDE with us, and that needed corrective action. So we had 1 year to produce a written curriculum. And so, I'm pretty black and white and want, and I like to, know what I need to do and get that done. And so we kind of put it to Shelley, what does that mean? Because for us to have to write a K-12 curriculum in 1 year, so that we can, be compliant and move this thing forward is kind of big. What does this really mean? And so, because only our elementary was the targeted school for this on-site review, because they're the building that receives title funds, she said, you have to have a written curriculum for K4. That means pacing guides, unit plans, lesson plans for all subjects K4. She said, you must have pacing guides completed for K12, and you have to have a plan of how you are going to get those unit plans, lesson plans, all of that aligned and rolling for K-12 as well by next November. So that's kind of where it stood. And it was a very, daunting task. So those were kind of the three main things that we focused on, clearly. And she gave us, what, like David had mentioned in an earlier slide, what are all of those components in that. And so we developed, some templates and all of that. So by November of 2019, like I said, we had to have all of that stuff done for K4, the plan for K12. We created these common templates for the pacing guides, unit plans, and lesson plans. And one thing that Shelley kind of emphasized is she wanted to see consistency K12. She didn't want this to be one thing and then this to be something else. She wanted to see some uniformity and some consistency across the board. So that's why we developed these very common templates. And you'll see in a few of the examples that we show you in a little bit that, it's the same format, whether it's kindergarten or whether it's high school chemistry. The pacing guide format's the same, the unit plan, the requirements are the same. Same thing on the lesson plans. Every lesson plan has to have these same components. Obviously, the content is different, but you have to have these things. The pacing guides and the unit plans, we decided would be housed in Google. We felt that was probably the best platform. We had been using Curriculum Crafter prior to this and found that to be kind of cumbersome. The elementary was using it, the secondary wasn't. And so when we wanted everything to be consistent, we kind of dropped what was happening with Curriculum Crafter. We had our templates, and everybody has access to that in Google. It makes it really nice when we have new hires or if we have a long-term sub or something like that, because we can grant them access immediately as soon as they're on board. And then they have whatever they need at their fingertips in terms of pacing guides and unit plans. Lesson plans we are housing in Planbook, and the district does have a district subscription to that. We felt that it was easier for us to control as a district if we had Planbook, because the district owns a subscription. So if somebody leaves, we still have their lesson plans. It's not like they take that with them or anything like that. So yeah, our pacing guides and unit plans are all in a shared drive on Google. And then the lesson plans, like I said, are housed in Planbook. So what does this really all look like? So David can click on whatever he wants here. So you'll see here, this is a second grade math pacing guide. And again, it's the common things that you see. The time frame, so depending on the course, you'll see it by month. You'll also see it if it's in particular, maybe a semester class, they'll break it down just by week. So instead of seeing September, October, you might see 5 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever. Then it kind of just, you list what the unit is, you list what the standards are, you list what the activities, and it doesn't have to be an exhaustive list. It's just kind of some ideas of what these activities are, and then what kinds of assessments are going to be used during that unit or chapter or theme that you're teaching. And again, it's the same format, whether it's second grade, here's the 7th grade one. Again, you see the same things all the way across the board. You have the time frame, the theme, unit or chapter, the standards, the activities, and the assessments all listed. Now, I will say this, that with the pacing guides, last year being a COVID year, we did take a little bit of time about mid-year because we knew we were not on pace. And so we spent some time kind of as the second semester was starting and said, okay, we did an activity at staff meetings where everybody took out their pacing guide and said, all right, highlight the things that you've completed. And it's fine. We know that it might not be much. Let's highlight the things that we've completed. And then either in grade levels or by department, they got together and said, okay, with what's remaining, knowing about what you were able to cover in that first semester and the slower pace, what are the big things that we must, what are our must-haves for the second semester that we have, knowing that we're not going to be able to cover everything in our pacing guide this year, but what are those, 2, 3, 4 major things that we are going to, without a doubt, cover for the rest of this year with whatever COVID brings us. So in our Google Drive, we do have, you'll see pacing guides, and then you'll see COVID pacing guides. So those were those adjusted pacing guides that we did. And that was just kind of a really nice activity for the teachers to say, hey, all right, right now we're not going to worry about what we normally would be doing, but this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of this year, this crazy year that was last year. In the unit plans, again, you're going to see that if you want us to show you some samples there, it's going to be the same kind of framework. This is not it's not actually the lesson plan, but when we talked to Shelley, she wanted to see the same, major components. You had to have the learning targets for that unit. You needed to have, what was the unit focus, kind of just an overall view. You needed to have the standards again. You needed to have vocabulary added in, what's the vocabulary for that unit? And then what are some of the resources and technology that you're going to be using during that time? And then some of the activities or other resources that you might have. And then, you can just kind of see that all listed there. And then finally, what are the assessments? And, again, those were the components that had to be there. So that's in every template, or that's in the template for every grade level, K through 12. So again, it doesn't matter if it's, reading in kindergarten or high school chemistry, it's still the same concepts are listed there. Now from this, then the teachers, this is where then the autonomy can come in for you as a teacher. So the unit plan is just kind of a basic outline of what that unit looks like and should include. Then your lesson plan is where, you as a teacher have some autonomy to pick the activities that you want to do, use the resources that you want to use, to make sure you hit those outcomes. So every lesson plan that teachers submit on Plan Book has to have the following things. Again, we have to have the standards listed. You have to have learning targets. You need to have a performance task, you need success criteria, and then your assessment. And so that's what principals are looking for when they are looking at teacher lesson plans on a weekly basis. So again, David alluded to this earlier time. And when we sat down after Shelley left us in November of 18, and the first reaction was we wanted to cry just a little bit. Because it was like, how are we going to put this all together, in 1 year, and then continue and finish out the work district wide. So we knew that time was going to be the greatest obstacle. So the first, obviously, focus, because that's where the on-site review was taking place, was K4. And so that first year, that 2018 to 2019, I spent a lot of time down at Beechton Elementary and worked with grade level teams. I would meet with them weekly during their prep. And so I kind of became a fixture in that building, like on Tuesdays, because that was kind of typically our day that we would meet. And so then we also developed release time for those teachers, because just meeting, 1 hour during their prep once a week, even though it was every week, that still wasn't going to do it. So we did develop some release time where we'd get subs, give people like a half a day that I would work with them. And then we would kind of rotate. So kindergarten might be on a morning, and then first grade would be in the afternoon, and those subs would float and rotate. And then we do the same thing with second and third, and then fourth grade. Also, the summer of 2019, we developed our Bulldog Curriculum Academy, and we kind of got that going and off the ground. And so we used some general funds, but also we had some title funds that we could use. And Shelley had talked with us about how to do that to help fund that work. And so we offered, I believe that the first time was, we had 3 weeks. It was like 4 days during 3 different weeks, starting in July, the last week of July, the first week of August, and then September, or the second week of August as well. And then teachers could kind of pick what they wanted, and we would pay them for 6 days of work time. So they could come in, work for 6 days that we would pay them for. And obviously the focus for that particular Bulldog Curriculum Academy was, pacing guides, unit plans, lesson plans. Because of the mandate from Shelley, we also had developed this plan that we would continue the work moving forward throughout all of 2019, even though Beach Now kind of had to be done by November. The rest of the district needed to be done, and we set a deadline of August of 2020. And so everything, lots of communication went out, kind of reiterating always, remember August 2020, you need to have these things done, August 2020. And so throughout the 1920 school year, we dedicated the majority of our PD days to unit plans, lesson plans, pacing guides. We have typically 2 staff meetings a month. One is kind of just a overview of stuff, nuts and bolts, things, that might be happening in your building. The second is more PD driven. And so those second meetings each month were devoted to curriculum, work. And so time was given there. And we would kind of monitor where things were at. And if a particular group or a particular grade level really needed some extra time, we could, build that in as well. And then in March, COVID hit. So that was kind of an interesting time as well. In fact, the day before, all of the schools were closing down. So on a Thursday, the announcement came late that Thursday night, and then Friday was everyone's last day. But on that Thursday, we actually had Shelley in our district, and we were meeting to talk about the progress we had made since she had last come, and where we were moving forward. And it was a really interesting meeting because everyone's phone, of course, was blowing up, including hers, with all of the COVID stuff going around. And it was just kind of a real surreal meeting, but it was really good because she was very impressed with how far we had come in so little time. So as COVID came and it became apparent that we were going to be shut down for the remainder of the school year, our district leadership team kind of made the decision that we were going to kind of up that timeline and try to push that instead of August 2020 to June of 2020, because, we were remote, but there really wasn't a whole lot of teacher responsibility per se in terms of teaching and things like that. And so we knew when the shutdown was happening that the majority of our teachers were in a really good place and had most, if not all, of their work done. We still had a few that were still straggling along. So we kind of upped that and said, hey, our staff is getting paid, while they're at home and we're remote. What a great opportunity to finish this up. So by actually of June of 2020, we had pretty much about 95% of everything done that needed to be done. We had another Bulldog Curriculum Academy in August of that year. It was only 2 weeks. But the focus had shifted a little bit because we needed to prepare for our online learning platform, which was going to be Google Classroom or Seesaw, depending on the building and the grade level. So again, there was a lot of different things that we were allowing teachers to do during that time because so many of them already had the curriculum work done. And then those that still needed to finish, they had that opportunity to finish too, because, the line was drawn in the sand that August of 2020 absolutely must be done or there would be consequences. And, we had really great response from everybody on that. And we managed to have everything done. So the question is, where's that curriculum now? You just file it away. We checked the box. We were, cleared and set free by MDE, from that corrective action. And the answer to that is absolutely not. It's still a huge focus for us. we still devote quite a bit of time and attention. And like I mentioned, a year ago at this time, we all sat down at every staff meeting and kind of went through pacing guides again and say, hey, we have to readjust because of COVID. So that kind of was at the forefront. But we're continually trying to change, update, and enhance what we've already established. The other thing that we have put in place that we found to be very beneficial is I meet monthly with each of the principals. And during that hour-long meeting, we devote just a little bit of time to randomly check teacher pacing guides, unit plans, and lesson plans. So the principal will pull up the teacher's, lesson plans on plan book. I'll pull up the unit plans and the pacing guides, and we kind of see, are they on track, with where, we've kind of established they should be. And it's been interesting because, last year was crazy. This year we're kind of in a little better flow, and we've had a few instances where people are just kind of off shotgunning, and it was like, what are they doing? And, we just, the principal will send them an email and say, hey, I have some questions about this or this, and why are you doing this or this? And, that way we can rein it back in. So we have these fence line checks, if you will, to make sure that people are kind of not wanting to go rogue again, and keeping things in line.
So Robin, thank you so much for that. Thanks for the vulnerable talk about on-site reviews.
Awesome.
The good news, if you can call it good news, is anybody that's been through an on-site review since I've been here fell in the same boat. So
well, and the one thing I did not mention that I think was hugely important is if we had wanted to do curriculum work prior to the on-site review, it would not have been well received, and I don't think it would have been successful. But the fact that you had MDE basically saying this is mandated, and if you don't do this, we will withhold your funding, that kind of holds a different weight. It's not just the superintendent or the curriculum director saying, hey, everybody, we're going to do this. It was, no, MDE is here and they have these findings, and, we can lose X number of dollars if we don't follow through, if we just blow this off. So that carried a little bit of weight. And so it wasn't just, oh, crazy Robin wants you to do all this stuff. It was, we have to do this because the MDE said so. And that, I think, really changed the willingness of people to do it, instead of not being willing to, oh, okay, we have to, this has to happen. So that it was really a blessing for us, I think, rather than a awful curse, because I just don't think we'd still be in the same boat as we were before, where everybody just doing whatever, if it hadn't been mandated.
So we have, thank you again, Robin. Yep. We have a few minutes until to kind of wrap up this section, and I have a couple of discussion prompts. I'm going to pop everybody into some breakout rooms, and it is broken up by district rooms and ISD rooms. So if you're an ISD person, you'll be in with other ISD people. There's 3 to 4 people in each of the rooms. And so here's a couple of discussion prompts. And really it's just kind of, what's the status of your curriculum? Are you using any kind of special products with that? Do you have anything you might want to share with the group? And then I know there's not a lot of time, so if you're not able to do this in your group, if you could maybe do it independently, there's a Jamboard linked on in this curriculum section. Really to just give our planning group some ideas about what are some things that we might want to continue to collaborate around with in the area of written curriculums with this group. So if you don't get the chance to do that with in your group time, if you could do that sometime throughout the day, I'd really appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms up for 7 minutes, and then we'll move on to our next presentation.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So we were asked today to think about letting you guys know a little bit about what we're doing when it comes to the culturally responsive teaching. And just to kind of go over today's outcomes with you, We're hoping that by the end of this hour together, we'll have the chance to understand the differences between multicultural education, social justice education, and culturally responsive education. We find that when we talk to teachers in the county, well, in the state everywhere, those three terms are used interchangeably and they actually mean very different things. So we just wanted you to be aware of the different meanings. So when you're speaking with your teachers and when they're telling you which one they're engaged in, might empower you a little bit in that conversation. We want to engage in some culturally responsive protocols meant to support the movement of students from dependent to independent learners. So Dave talked last session or the first session about the opportunity to learn. And one thing we see a lot of is that our most marginalized kids often don't have the opportunity to be engaged in productive struggle around rigorous and relevant content, right? They're taught as dependent learners. And we want to help them change into move towards independent learners. And that's what our whole outcome for culturally responsive education is, the way we present it. And we also want you to just get a glimpse of the learning we're offering to Muskegon County teachers. So during the session today, we're going to talk a little bit, but we're also going to ask you to participate. You'll be able to chat in the Zoom, unmute and share. We're going to do a little bit of reading. We'll be in breakout groups, and we'll also offer some personal reflection and think time before you enter into those spaces, so you can be ready to engage in the conversation. So just a quick overview of our series. So we've done so far, we've done one online cohort in the county with about 30 teachers from most districts. And we've done one cohort with Muskegon Public, with again, about 30 teachers. We did it at Muskegon Public. We're offering those cohorts again this winter, and it may change a little bit, but you can see on the screen the sessions that we've offered. So our first session is we just do some personal identity work, and we try to figure out how our personal identity impacts how we think about education, how we think about the kids we serve, and we want to just build some personal awareness. Then we start looking at things like culturally responsive brain rules. We're trying to move our kids from dependent to independent learners, talking about the importance of trust and rapport in the classroom. We look at creating alliances so we can improve academic mindsets for our students. And then finally, in the last session, we look at some protocols for wise feedback and for strategies for building what Zaretta Hammond calls the intellective capacity of our students. And the person we use for this mostly is Zaretta Hammond and her culturally responsive teaching in the brain. So we're going to go through a couple of protocols with you guys today, just as an opportunity for us to engage. And the first one is called the Tea Party Protocol. And I'm going to mute and ask Danielle to jump in.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. So we are going to jump into one of the protocols that we have used in our session. And to understand kind of the purpose behind the protocols, because we're going to do two with you, Zaretta Hammond talks a lot about the use of protocols because it really does open up the opportunity for all students to engage in the content or in the learning that we're doing within the class period or in a session that you're in. So when you use a protocol, and sometimes the word protocol has this little caveat to it, it really just is supposed to provide some structure and allow students who may talk a ton when given the opportunity, or students who may not want to participate, maybe struggle to figure out how to participate. It provides structure so that everyone has an equal chance to engage in that learning. And so Zaretta will talk a lot in her books and even in the article we're going to have you read about providing those opportunities, and protocols are one of the ways to do that. Zaretta in her book also talks about how we initiate kids into the learning, and she breaks it down into three three ways. So she asks teachers or educators to ignite the learning. So how are we getting students kind of excited in the learning? Chunk the learning, because the brain needs opportunities to take in information in smaller chunks and then to chew on that. So then there's a process. So this ignite, chunk, chew is kind of this process that she feels like opens up this opportunity for students to start to build some independence in their learning. And then at the very end, this review. So how are you taking away this information and what might you do with it? So ignite, chunk, chew, and then review is also a really important part. And for us as educators, that opportunity to kind of gather information from our students on where they're at. So this Tea Party protocol is actually a way to ignite students into some learning. And it provides a structure so that all students can participate and start to make some meaning or contextualize what they're about to learn. And so the Tea Party protocol is something that you can use if you're going to read a text, if you're going to watch a video, if you're going to start a longer unit of study. It's a way to chunk some of that information and have students to start make meaning. So in the agenda, there is a document, and it says quotes on it. And let me see if I can find that to pop it in the chat, or if Michelle or Tom, if you do it very quickly. Thank you very much.
Got it.
So I'm going to actually, it says 3 minutes on the screen, but I am actually going to give you about 5 minutes because I want you to be able to read through all of those quotes. And then I also want you to have time to personally reflect on the quote that you choose. So you're just going to choose one of the quotes from the document and then personally reflect. You could write down some notes. You could just have some think time on what the quote means to you right now in your role, or how you kind of are responding to that quote, what's resonating about that quote that you chose. And so if everybody can just turn off their camera, open up that quotes document, spend a couple minutes reading through, and then choose one that resonates with you and take some time to personally reflect. When we come back, we are going to go into a breakout and finish this protocol. So I'm going to start my timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together.
Tom, are the groups that we had established last time going to be good?
Nope, I've actually recreated those.
Okay,
So I'll go ahead and open them up when.
sounds good. Got the time all set on it and everything?
Yeah, that should work. Thanks.
We're going to give you about 30 more seconds to kind of finish your reflection. All right, if everybody could come back to the meeting, the Zoom room here. So hopefully you had some time to read through the quotes. There were quite a few quotes. And when we come back from the breakout, I will also share with you another document that has where the quotes came from so that you know who those quotes were from. And the other thing is that the quotes that we pulled from were from the text that we were using from the series, and then also the article that you're going to read. So this is really starting to ignite your thinking about making some meaning about the discussion that you're going to go into. So you're going to go into a breakout, share the quote that you chose and what it meant to you and maybe why you chose that. And then just try and make sure that everyone has some equal time to share. If we were in person, so if we were in a classroom, if we were in a meeting room together, this protocol actually would be used using index cards. So you would randomly get a quote that you could select and then think about how that quote meant, what it meant to you. And then we would actually get up and walk around and find a partner and have a conversation. And then you would actually switch partners and do that a couple times. So the idea of a tea party is that we're mingling around and kind of having conversations with a lot of different people about something that we reflected on. But in this case, we're just going to have time to choose the one and have a conversation. All right, Tom, whenever you are ready, you can put everyone in a breakout, and then we will come back in a little bit.
You good, Tom?
I'm good, or
Okay.
at least I'm average.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump in a room.
Yeah, go see what people are saying.
Right. How's it going?
Awesome.
Good.
Dave Hunt, good morning. Welcome.
How y'all doing?
Morning,
Good.
Dave.
Room 6 representing today. I
No
love
doubt.
it.
Our room.
Let's smashy some ideas, huh?
Everybody. There's usually never enough time to have a lot of conversation, but hopefully you were able to kind of dive into some of those thoughts and kind of lift some of those things out of the quotes. Wanted to talk just really quick about why would this protocol be considered culturally relevant? And so when we think about providing opportunities for all students, we're also through this protocol allowing them to bring in their experience from wherever they're coming to have a conversation about why something meant something to them. So I'm bringing my past and my experience, what I feel is important to me, to a group and able to express that, as are all the other people in my group. And I'm also getting an opportunity to listen to others and how things make meaning for them within their own experience. And so just providing those opportunities in this kind of a way kind of lifts that idea of we're being culturally relevant, because we are allowing students to value their experience, and I'm valuing who they are by being able to listen. And so this this protocol was a way to do that. And if we had time, if we were in person, we would get a chance to kind of talk with more groups and kind of mix things up. But today we're just going to do it in that way. And it does bring forward some of the big ideas from the text that we use and the article that we are going to read. So we've now ignited your thoughts and started to chunk that material a little bit for you. And any big takeaways from the protocol? If you feel free to unmute or type into the Zoom chat, how did the protocol go for you? What are some things that you kind of took away from your group that you might want to lift for the whole group?
I'll just say a simple activity of looking at that quote and letting you choose your own and reflect on it generated some really good conversation in our group. And so a simple activity that gave me choice generated really good conversations in the small group we had.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, choice is one of those things as well that gives some students some autonomy. Like I believe this is important to me and I get to express that, which is a great way to build some of that rapport and belonging within your classroom, which is a huge theme. And building a culturally responsive classroom is building that rapport. This goes back to what Tom was talking about and working towards alliances. Anyone else? I know someone typed into the chat. I think it was Dave and yeah. Everyone in our group was able to make a personal connection, not just with their own quote, but the quotes of others. Yes. Thank you, Dave. And Megan. Valuable, thank you. Yeah, the activity was open, so there wasn't a right or wrong answer. I think this goes back to allowing a lot of access for students, so everybody has an opportunity to find a place where they would fit in this activity and would build this idea of a safe space. So I can choose this and I can talk about it in a way that makes sense to me. It's not closed, there's no right or wrong answer. Is that what you were kind of talking about, Sarah? All right. Well, thank you for participating in that first protocol. I am going to put into the chat in just a second, once I find it, another document. It'll look the same, but it has the authors of those quotes so that you know where they came from. And I'm going to pass, I think, this off to Michelle next.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm glad that you had a good conversation because it means you have those conversational juices all warmed up, and we're going to need that for this next protocol as well. This is a text rendering protocol, and its purpose is to be able to sort of collaboratively construct meaning, especially with a rigorous text. So this is something that teachers can use when they have content that needs to be taught, and especially if it's difficult content. The idea here is that Tom already has numbered the paragraphs for us. So you'll see there are two options of the article. One is a cleaner copy that's from the web and it's easier to read the table, but it's harder to annotate or make notes on. The second one is a Google Doc. It'll force you to make a copy and it's easier to mark up, but the chart is a little harder to see. Whichever one you choose to engage with, we're going to give you 15 minutes to read. And we know that we're going to be probably bumping up a little bit close to that break at the end. So during that time, if your bladder is telling you now is the time, it'll be okay to do that. Just know that we do just have 15 minutes for the reading. And while you are reading, your job is to either on sticky notes or on the document itself, write down a sentence that was meaningful to you. Oh, Tom, could you make sure that's accessible? We tried it, but of course we have ISD accounts. That's probably what happened there. Tom's going to fix that for me. As you're reading the article, you're going to be looking for a sentence that was meaningful to you, a phrase that moved, engaged, or provoked you, and then a word that captured your attention or struck you as powerful. After everyone has had a chance to read, then we will go into a breakout. And this again is one of those structured protocols that allows an opportunity for everyone to engage. And again, you have a lot of choice of the sentence, phrase, and word that you're choosing, but what comes as a result of that is all of these high leverage points from the article sort of come together in a discussion. And so that is sort of how the text rendering protocol works. And at the beginning, Danielle talked about the idea of ignite, chunk, and chew. And that's what this protocol is giving you a chance to do some chunking and chewing. So you're kind of reading the article, looking for things that kind of stand out to you, and then you'll have an opportunity to chew on those when you're meeting with your breakout group. Give me a thumbs up. Is everyone able to access the article now? We might need to use the web-based copy. The only issue here is that you won't be able to say, I chose paragraph 12. You'll still be able to like sort of indicate where it was in the article. What do you think, Tom? Is it possible to make it accessible, or should we go with the web-based version?
I think it should be accessible now to give it a shot. My computer is operating a little slowly this morning.
It's working now.
Huzzah. Okay, so as a
Thank you for your
reminder,
patience.
if you have sticky notes available, pull out 3 of those. We chose this article because she's really talking about these different distinctions that people have when they're talking about equity work. And so as you're reading, also read with a lens. Where does your building fall in this kind of thinking? Okay, so I'm going to put my timer on for 15 minutes. I'm going to mute my screen. I invite you to do the same. But in a moment, you're going to be placed into a breakout. And we're going to start with whoever has the longest hair today is the winner, and they're going to go first. Sorry, Tom. And you'll start by sharing the sentence that you chose and why you chose it. And then you get to choose, you're in trio, so you'll get to choose the next person that goes. They'll do the same thing. They'll explain the sentence they chose and why they chose it. And there's no crosstalk during this time. So each person is just sharing their sentence, the reason they chose it, goes to the next person, their sentence, the reason they chose it. And then you'll do the same thing, but this time with a phrase. And then I'm not sure that you're going to have enough time to do your word. We're going to give you about 10 minutes in that breakout. So it's going to be cutting it just a little bit shorter than what we normally would. And that's because we want to honor your time as much as possible. And then when we come, we're going to pull everybody back for the group discussion so that we can just have that little bit of time together. And then Tom will sort of wrap us all up. So I believe we are ready to head into breakout. The person with the longest hair is going to start first. Please no crosstalk so everyone gets their opportunity to speak. All right, here we go.
Danielle and Michelle, if you want to talk about the article, I'd go in a room with you.
Okay.
If you guys had something to talk about with a group, with your planning team, that's
We
fine.
just talked about it out here.
Yeah,
There you go.
really.
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
We just
Well,
you know what?
we decided not to go in just so that other people had more time to talk.
So I see that Andy and Sephram just have 2 in their room. I think somebody must have left, so I'll join them.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
We'll talk later.
Perfect.
you.
Sorry, can I join you guys?
Never.
Thought that you only had 2, so.
That's all right. The one I keep coming back.
All right, you're all set.
All right, Devaney is going to be in charge of the PowerPoint. So if you can pull that up, Devaney. And you're muted. We can't hear you. So while Devaney is pulling that up, I would encourage both Dave and Deanna. You've worked with MPS for a long time, so feel free to interject any of the information we're going to share. And to everyone on the meeting, if you have a question, feel free to put that in the chat as we go through. So Devaney and I are sharing a little bit of a historical perspective and how we've come to use an online assessment system. It is part of our student management system. It's a separate company. It's called Performance Matters. And just as an introduction as we start, and I wait for Devaney as we're looking at her hand and everything. Okay, there we go. I don't know if everybody knows our background, so we thought we'd take a minute and just share. I've been at Muskegon 4.5 years now. Prior to that, I was a high school principal in Grand Blanc, an assistant principal at Troy High School, and then a secondary math teacher in Houston, Hamtramck, and in Troy. So I've had a wide variety of experiences in different types of school settings, different size of school settings, but regardless of the setting, curriculum, instruction, and assessment are key to learning, regardless of the students that are sitting in front of me. And those are part of my core beliefs. So Devaney, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
For my whole career. So this is my 15th year here. I've done all grade levels as far as teaching in the classroom. And then I was also a technology coach at Nelson for a while, and also a technology teacher. And now I've moved into the role of instructional technology supervisor. And so that's kind of a little bit about me.
Thanks, Devaney. And really, none of the work we're about to show you would happen without Devaney, because she is the master at helping with instructional technology. So the next slide, I think we all know the importance of assessment in learning, but really providing that data to teachers and students, and I would also argue parents, regarding assessment data to help guide teaching and learning. And how we came to Performance Matters started what felt like years ago. It was the end of first semester, January 2018, I think it was. And I wanted algebra as a gatekeeper, right? Everybody knows that you can get through to algebra, but then for some reason, that's the place that you struggle. So I wanted to get the algebra teachers together, look at the exam data and talk about what went well, what didn't, how can we revisit some of these standards. And there was no way for us to pull the data unless somebody hand wrote how each question, how students did on each question. And then even aligning them to standards was not in existence. So that started this ball rolling around what can we do to use our data and our assessments to start collaborating together. This doesn't happen overnight either. So know that I'll give you a little history on how we came to that as well. So the objectives for today, Devaney?
Okay, so our objectives for today are providing an overview of Performance Matters. I'm going to give some examples of reporting and the data that we use within the buildings and some of the testing data within the buildings. And then we've also added early warning indicators in our system. So we'll be showing how those work along with our testing data. And then we'll discuss the PLC implications and challenges.
Thank you, Devaney. So before we show a brief overview of our Performance Matters, I want to talk about the last 4.5 years and the work that we've done leading up to this online assessment system. So back in April 2017, when I came, right at the end of the school year, I made it a goal to visit all classrooms. What's happening? What are kids learning? How much are kids engaged versus teachers teaching? And from that, we have done many, many things. And the first was exactly what was talked about with Robin and David earlier, is ensuring we have viable and guaranteed curriculum in every grade level, in every subject area. So we had to have a process for piloting curriculum, for adopting curriculum. We had to make sure it was research-based and show teachers how to do that. And then training. So we, in the past, prior to 2017, we had adopted some curriculum, but never really trained teachers and never thought of, you guys brought up another good point, when new teachers come on board, how do we train them in each of the areas? So we have that training system now in place. We needed to make sure they had materials, pacing guides, assessment calendars, all those things. But you can do all of that. And one thing that Dave mentioned is then you don't allocate the appropriate instructional time for the different content areas. So Dave, as he always is a great resource, we did a book study. If you've never read this on elementary scheduling, would highly recommend it. It, for teachers, is sometimes difficult just because we have to get everybody on the same page. Math needs to be taught 60 minutes a day. Reading is a 90-minute block every day at the elementary level. So we did that time study, took us a couple of years. We also have found that we have to audit materials in classrooms. So I just keep going to elementary, but let's use everyday math. It's a requirement that they have a number line throughout the classroom. Is that posted? Is it used? Because that's part of that curriculum. And the other piece that we found too is, what are our instructional expectations? And for those of you that do teacher evaluations, you know that's very important to a teacher. And so we have focused on a lot of retraining around 5D. Our school improvement plan, our district improvement plan really focus on student engagement, learning targets, success criteria, and all of those pieces. We have now an evaluation handbook. We have observation protocol. We meet face-to-face with teachers every single time we observe them to give them feedback. The other piece, we're a blueprint district, if anyone knows what that means, but we work very closely with Alicia Hoppe. We have walkthrough data. We go through all of our classrooms and we call them high quality vision statements for instruction for all the core subject areas. And then we collect data. Principals review that data, and then every quarter, the principals then report to central office, how can we help them with teaching and learning in that process? So there's a lot of data collected. In terms of assessments, we thought we had common assessments, but we wanted to dig deeper to ensure that all teachers were taking, I'll use algebra. You're not to cut out questions 15 through 30 because you didn't get there. It's an expectation you will cover the content. So that's where we landed on performance matters. So Devaney will show you some samples. It gets a little technical. So feel free to ask any questions. We can stop and explain. Devaney?
All right. I want to make sure I shared my sound, so.
The Unified Assessment and Analytics Platform is a
Can you
comprehensive
hear it?
solution for managing every aspect of school district's testing.
A little louder.
Let's begin by examining Unified's powerful reports to identify both strengths and weaknesses of educators and students with streamlined analytics. When teachers
Devaney, it went, we can't hear it now.
I think she needs to unmute.
Yes.
You cannot hear it?
It looks like it's not playing.
Oh. Let me see.
performance on all assessed standards. The scoreboard report quickly answers
Can you hear it?
administrators' growth.
Yeah,
and
maybe just
performance
go back to the beginning now.
Sure.
of
So Devaney, hold on a sec. Before you play, this is just a brief overview and then we'll dig a little deeper into each of the reports. So go ahead.
District
No.
checking process. Let's begin by
No.
examining Unified's powerful report to identify both strengths and weaknesses of educators and students with streamlined analytics. When teachers log into Unified, they immediately see the My Unified dashboard showing a basic overview of each student's performance. To learn more about a student, the teacher simply selects the student's card. The student detailed report provides basic information such as their schedule and grades, a summary of test scores, and the student's performance on all assessed standards. The scoreboard report quickly answers administrators' growth and performance questions by providing a side-by-side comparison of multiple measures. The hierarchical view allows for an in-depth analysis between schools, teachers, and students. To compare various demographic groups' performance on a single test, use the pre-configured choices to simultaneously add multiple columns with selected filters. Identifying student growth or achievement gaps is easy to do with the baseball card report. Teachers and administrators simply select tests for comparison from a variety of sources, such as national tests, state standardized tests, local assessments, or results imported from other assessment sources. The color swatches are used to filter by achievement level to answer the question guiding your analysis. In this example, we are examining students who dropped in proficiency from one school year to the next on the PARCC math assessment. Early warning indicators provide a glimpse into potential reasons for the drop in proficiency. The student item analysis report allows teachers to dig deeply into student performance on a single test. Teachers can quickly see student performance on specific standards and, with a single click, identify students performing in each achievement band. The scores tables show each student's overall score as well as the student's performance on each item. The item detail shown here is a great start for item analysis, but data lovers will find a gold mine of additional information in the test statistics report. By now, you may be wondering about the source of this valuable informative data. The Performance Matters data team loads state and national data, while Unified provides the tools necessary to create and deliver diagnostics, classroom formatives, and high-stakes benchmark tests administered in your district. Unified's easy-to-use item interaction templates makes creation of robust technology-enhanced items a breeze. Additionally, Performance Matters partners with leading content companies to provide their item banks in Unified. Unified's powerful search tools allow users to locate items from all available sources to build tests and administer them through an online testing platform or scan sheets. Unified delivers results in minutes, giving users easily accessible information to make data-informed decisions for student growth.
Okay. So with that said, we thought we'd go over the 4 objectives that we're going to talk about. And performance matters has kind of been my baby, I guess I would call it. And it's with any technology, sometimes it's a love-hate relationship. You love it, and then it drives you insane at the same time. But I have learned to love this program because it is super valuable in the information that we receive, and the teaching and learning that can come out of everything that we gather in this system is amazing. So Performance Matters is a whole child perspective in I forgot I'm not on the screen of Performance Matters. When you first log in and you have your home screen, you will see your whole class, and you can click on a child and learn all kinds of information about the child. So the student detail is what would come up first. You can here see their class schedule, their attendance, any early warning indicators that they've hit, such as attendance or failing courses. You can also see any discipline logs that have been entered on a child. You can also see their test results that are locally given. And then in this tab, you can see how they scored on the standards. Also within the test results, if they've taken any state level testing, that will also be in this tab as well. So that's kind of the overview of what a student's card would be. Not only can the teacher see this, but the student has access to this information, and so does the parent. Our reporting and use of tests in here. So there are multiple different reports in this platform. If any of you use PowerSchool, which is our attendance and report card system, this integrates with PowerSchool. It was bought by PowerSchool, so it's a really nice integration and it talks to the system. So within here, we can easily build tests, push them out, and then put the grades right into PowerSchool all in one fall swoop. So building the test, we have tasked our secondary teachers with to build within their departments, and our elementary curriculum specialist build the test for all our K-5 assessments. In here, it's a little backwards. So again, that love-hate relationship of knowing what comes first and just really understanding the system. You have to always, when we're in here, we create an item which then gets put on top of a test. So you build out your test item by item. The benefit to that, what I've found the benefit to that is if a teacher starts building an exam, let's say at the beginning of the semester, knowing what their outcome for the course is, they can build all of those questions, have the exam ready, and then take a few of those questions throughout the semester and kind of see where are they with this as a more formative assessment as they're teaching that piece of the content. So we can use those items on multiple different tests. And then the reporting that goes with this, and I'm just going to exit out of this full screen and click on, hopefully, maybe not. I'm going to go right into Performance Matters to show you some of the types of reporting that we get from these assessments that we locally build.
So while Devaney is doing that, we have a variety of ways that teachers can create their own items. They can use a test or an assessment that's already created for them. Or you can use the Performance Matters test bank by standard to put that as part of the test.
Yep. So thank you for that reminder. So after they create the items, the tests, or they use from the item bank that we purchased to go with this, which we got multiple different banks in here for teachers so that they feel confident that all the standards are covered. We've had really good feedback on that. Then they can go to this report section and see multiple different reports. Now, currently, I kind of scale back for them what they can and can't see because some of it can be super overwhelming. So we start with just the first 4 or the first 5 reports for them so they can easily understand what each report is. The first one we use is called the Student Item Analysis Report. And actually, I should probably put this in demo mode. This will give us, let's see. Do you want me to do elementary math? We talked about. We have a lot of tests in here, so sorry as you bear with me. So our teachers at a district overview, I can see how we are doing across the district in this program. I can also, sorry, the window's in the way of where I'm pointing to. I can see how students did, where they scored on each standard that was on the test. Here tells the standard that was assessed, and then how many of the items on the test were coded with that standard. I can then tell how the district did as a whole. And then I can see individual student scores down here. We also have a tab here that shows us these items are scored by the machine. So there's two types of items that we can do. We can do machine scored items, and we can also do hand scored items where teachers score using a rubric. So the great thing about this program is even if they have a performance task for students, which we're all hoping that that's happening often, when they can put a rubric right into the system and give them a score, and then we can still compare over time or use that formatively as we move forward into teaching. So we have these rubric scores as well. And this is the basic report that teachers would use to look at their individual test scores on a specific test. They also have this button right here called Gradebook, which this quickly and easily just sends it right to their class into PowerSchool, and the grades are exported right here. Okay. The next report that we use quite often is called Baseball Card. In Baseball Card, we have the ability to see multiple different pieces of data in here. We can see state and local data compared to our common assessments within our district, compared to our early warning indicators if students have been absent or they're failing courses. So in here, we could pick multiple different items. With the state and local, with us not doing M-STEP, it's a little bit hard right now to show that piece because it is, the data is not current right now. So in here though, what we do have is we have loaded our iReady results for both math and reading, if anyone does that. So I could pick overall scores for 2021. That's what we have loaded now. It can give me multiple different options, so I can compare that with their level in one of our common assessments on reading. Oops, I don't want that. I'm sorry, assessment. Elementary reading, and we can kind of see how did they score compared to their iReady. And I do some swatching. I can apply the filter, so I apologize. Let me undo this. You know what? I'm sorry. I wanted this.
So we were just
Going. There we go. That's what I wanted.
While she's doing that, a week or two ago, we wanted to look at current 6th grade math and how students were doing in current unit 3, whatever it was, compared to those standards that were tested on the M-STEP. But really the best data we have on M-STEP is so long ago that we could compare, but it doesn't tell us much. So we've been using more of our iReady along with our common assessments.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So in here, we take our common assessments, look at the iReady, and then we can also do multiple things to this where we can add student filters and say, okay, if we want to find out different ethnicity, how they've scored on here, we can choose an ethnicity and it will narrow the list down. Okay. We can choose to find out if students with disabilities, how did they do on the test? Hit apply and do that here. We can add more layers by finding out, okay, of all these kids, if they are not passing the test or doing well, how many absences do they have? So in that case, we could go into our early warning indicators and see if they're absent for 10% of the time, 5 or more absences. And if I throw that one in there and swatch it, now we can look at this and say, okay, here's, well, no wonder. And so that's kind of how we can look through this data, putting these together. Teachers can do this. We do this in groups, in PLC groups, and look at multiple different data sources. So you'll have to keep me on time too, Dr. Hammond, because I'm not paying good attention.
You're good. I think you're on comparative results next.
Okay, so comparative results is the next one. This is the one we use after we use the student item analysis. And what we do is, as a department, we will pull up and we'll use our algebra test. We had an algebra test. We had all the standards on here. And then what we can do here is we can take whatever schools took this assessment, place each teacher that took the assessment on here. Oops. And now we have this really awesome comparative results and great discussion with our PLC protocol template that teachers go through and look at these results, see how are kids doing in each of their classes, and then they come up with action plans for how are they going to do this? How are they going to teach this moving forward? So this gives teachers cannot see this. We actually have to send this report to them or pull it up for privacy for them, but they're able to then see this once we send it to them on within their department or within their grade level for some comparison. Okay. I want to make sure I'm on the, okay, so here's our reporting, comparative results, and I already went into here. And those are the I would say those are the basic 3 reports that we use most often. Scoreboard is more if you have multiple buildings in your district and you want to see not so many students, but you're comparing by building versus comparing by student. This gives a little bit cleaner for principals to look by building. One we haven't dug into as much. So, go on to here. Our early warning indicators. So this is great because we can set up early warning indicators for anything we want that is in this system. So in our early warning indicator system, we have the ability to set up events. So if we want to see kids' absence events and say, okay, our policy says once they hit the threshold of 5, we need to send a letter and so forth. So we kind of follow our policy, and I set this up according to what our attendance policy is. So we can easily find out who has hit that threshold and what steps need to be taken next. We also have the ability to put in behavior indicators and find out how often they're happening, how many office discipline referrals we get, what level, behavior levels, and we can also do the indicators by incident. We also have the ability to see course failures in here. So this will trigger for multiple different things. I've worked with the principal or the assistant principal at the high school to go through what he's looking for. So he can incorporate some interventions when they're hitting these thresholds of course failure. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of how performance matters, the setup, the layout of what this looks like, what a teacher can see, what I can see on my homepage. I see a district view, so I'll see attendance rates for the whole district. We can also see all of our demographics on this page. We can also see local tests right from this screen, so I can quickly swap through here. And then I can also see, I think this one is, oh, it's my access. Okay, so this is also our step in my access results right on my home screen. Okay, I'll stop here for questions.
I'll add to our project that we're working on now is at the elementary level, and I put the resource in our agenda, our MTSS academic piece. As teachers are doing different interventions with students, they'll be able to log them in Performance Matters, so that when the child goes from grade 2 to grade 3, then that third grade teacher can see what interventions have been done with the child so far and the results of them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Devaney, you want to go to the next slide? Any questions, Devaney?
So I do have a question. Thinking about the data in portion of the whole thing. So that we saw the iReady and things like that. So basically, if the systems have like an export function, are you doing exports and imports? Are they automatically talking with some systems?
Yeah, so yes and yes. It automatically talks with some. iReady comes in automatic, but then I also have the capability to upload anything that we want.
And then when it comes to like the local assessments, do they have to take it? Do you have to use like the Unity system to get it all in there to be standards aligned? Is there other ways to get local assessment data in?
Yes. So as long as they have a format I follow, if I can make it into the format that they like, if we can export it from any system, we can import it in here. So yes, potentially we could use a lot. They've worked with some really big districts like Dallas ISD. So Dallas, I mean, their list on their baseball card is 10 times longer than ours. So we're just kind of building that out. And so as people start to ask, so for instance, our reading data, our SFA data, that is not in there currently, but I have it in the queue waiting to be uploaded. It's just, you know, it's stagnant. So we got to keep uploading that. So we're trying to figure out a good system for some of it, and some of it is fine to be stagnant. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
All right, so obviously any system like this comes with some challenges, and we probably, I knock on wood, I think we faced every single one that could possibly be faced. But one of the, you know, as we're doing this, we're asking these type of questions. So as you dig a little hole, then it becomes a bigger and bigger hole. But one is, are the common assessments being given? So we learned that we built, say, a geometry test, but then at first teachers were making copies and then editing. Okay, you can't do that. The point is to have all the kids in geometry take the same exam or assessment. The other piece that we're starting to see much more of is, do teachers really know and understand the standards that are being taught in the course? And we would think yes, but the answer really is no, not in every case. For example, I think it was social studies, they send their assessment questions to our curriculum specialist, and she will say, this wasn't a standard to be taught in this unit. So we know you love to teach that, but that's not part of the unit. Also, how are students being informed after they take the tests? Are they going through it? So we're going to do we've done a lot of training over the last several years, and we're getting better and better at it. But students need to be informed about the progress that they're making. And then even at some point, setting student goals in the system around their progress. Always with any test, are we really measuring what the standard was or what was taught? And this is helping us narrow down a little tighter. Ultimately, this whole system, really, we want it to be used for formative assessments. We kind of started backwards with summative, and we get it, but we wanted everybody to feel comfortable with the system, and then eventually using formative assessments in the system, so then you can adjust instruction. And then once you use those formative assessments, or even some of your standardized assessments, what changes are happening to instruction based on this data? And when you look at some of our test scores, you could see a lot of red. So yes, it feels overwhelming, but what are the pieces that we can celebrate success of moving forward? And really, we've had a lot of conversations lately about building teacher capacity, about best practices around assessments. So we have been talking with the Assessment Consortium, and Terry Portis has been helping us with where do we build our teacher knowledge base and practice around that. So those are kind of our thinking around next steps and our challenges that we have. All right, Devaney, one more.
Okay.
Slide.
Okay. So this is how we do our data protocol here. The secondary data protocol was created first, and I just kind of emulated that for elementary, kind of all going through that same process. So I put a copy here, and it forces you to make a copy. If you want to beg, borrow, steal, feel free. But we just take this, I tell exactly what, as teachers are going through their PLC, the directions tell them exactly where to go within Performance Matters, where they're looking in Performance Matters, and how to review their data. They are looking at the standards that they were most successful on, and two that students had challenges with. They're reflecting on that, and what are their actions to adjust their practice after they've noticed what standards are still challenges. So it's somewhat simple and to the point, but very useful for teachers when they're working in PLC groups. So those are on there.
And I think
And
that's it.
That's it.
Michelle, you asked a good question. So our schedule this year has been every Friday afternoon. We have professional learning for about 2 hours. So I would say PLCs, it depends on the building, but PLCs are meeting at the secondary level more often. At elementary, we're going to have some conversations with principals next week about trying to get them in at least twice a month. Really getting teachers used to looking at the data and then how do I change instruction for next week? Any other questions?
I think I just have kind of an observation. There just seemed to be, there was a lot of overlap between some of the things that, in the curriculum conversation and this assessment conversation, and it seems like a common denominator in it is that professional time for people to work together. And I think that it's something that, we need to just acknowledge, like in other normal jobs, people work together all the time, but in teaching jobs, the teachers are working with the kids all day. And we also expect them to be able to be collaborative and have these conversations. And I really appreciate that you in your district built that time into your schedule it kind of goes back to that elementary scheduling book. If you want something to happen, you have to build the time in for it to happen. And you purposefully did that.
Jenny, on that note, how did you guys do that with student? How do you do your seat time?
So this year's a little different. We do have an hour a day that goes toward instruction for online asynchronous learning or more. 60 minutes a day elementary, and I think 85 minutes a day secondary. And we'll have some grades and scores on that, asynchronous learning coming up once our grades are finalized this week.
And then your teachers get a half day on those days? Like how much time are you able to build for teachers?
The kids leave elementary, they start at 8, leave about 11:15. We give teachers lunch and prep, and then they have, I think it's 2 hours off the top of my head on Fridays for PD.
Okay. I might want to follow up with you about that. Thanks.
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. We do a lot of after school training. We have hourly stipends. We do a lot of work in the summer. That's been somewhat of a struggle this year as everyone's feeling kind of the pressure and stress, but that also helps. We've had, Danielle's been helping with a math group, understanding standards and working really hard with that. So we've done some good things out of school time, but it can't be mandated. It all needs to be voluntary. All right, I think that's it for us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Devaney, for joining us. And I see that Mary just pasted in something, looks like some reference to the Michigan Assessment Consortium, and there's a link in there, so make sure you read that. I think it's a little too much for me to summarize right this second. So we are at the end of our agenda and at our roundtable time. And so I'm just going to point out a couple of things real quick on the agenda. I'm not going to share my screen again. Everybody can just take a peek at theirs. I just have 2 items linked there that can be looked at asynchronously. One is I am running the statewide MyKIP PD again this year. It's a 4-part series on February 1st, February 15th, March 1st, March 15th. You do not have to go to all of the sessions. If there's one that looks particularly interesting or that sort of thing, it's free to register. I'm recording everything. I'm making a giant resource dashboard like we did last time. So wanted to point that out. I also have just a link in there with all of the dates for the consolidated application. So hopefully everybody's been staying on top of that. I've helped those that have asked for it. If anybody's having difficulty with their consolidated app or need some help getting that submitted on time, which is next week, then let me know and we'll see if we can squeeze some time in. So, okay, so that was my part of the roundtable. And then Jenny, could I turn it over to you to kind of just give a little bit of background on that, your question that you had posed to the ISD about the countywide tech purchase?
Yeah, and I think Andy really has some of the answers that I had questions for, but basically we were looking at, and with all our ESSER funds, we've been able to afford some technology tools that we probably wouldn't have been able to before, but moving forward, that money is eventually going to go away. So we have been talking about for some time, starting to create our own online courses for students. And here, an example is Canvas. So Canvas is a site that you can create, you can share, it's real easy to use. So I was talking to a colleague on the east side of the state, but it's expensive. And so I asked her, I said, well, how do you even afford that? She said, well, the CTC and the ISD have the master version, and then we buy seats from them. And I said, well, was that just an offer? She said, yeah, they offer things like that over time. And so as people are interested, they can, participate or not. I just don't know how we start or do that. I mean, obviously we do that with Power School, you know, but there aren't other things that we do that, and we all have credit recovery platforms, whether that's Edmentum or Apex or whatever. I just think our buying power would be stronger if we did it all together rather than each of us trying to negotiate and figure out what works best. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know if we can do it right away. I know we have a list that helps, but it's the buying power itself, I think, that would help all of us.
Andy, could you maybe give a little background on just the information that you have in that document that's linked there?
I'd be happy to. One thing I did mention is that RMC Save does go out to competitive bid for things, including software. And some of the items that you purchase, if they're not on a competitive bid specifically, there's a catalog discount. RMC Save also has something called Spot Connect that allows a person to say, I'm looking to buy this. Is anybody else looking to buy this? And I'd be happy to help work with anybody who wanted to try to get that going. I will mention what Jennifer said is sort of a bigger question is learning management systems. And we've had that discussion, I think, with superintendents and curriculum directors. Canvas is one solution, Schoology is another. Some people use Google Classroom as a learning management system. And so I think if we wanted to look at a county-wide adoption of a learning management system, that would be a bigger question to bring back up. And then that would, you know, could potentially lead to some savings, but I'll leave that to this group if they feel like that's where we want to go.
Yeah, and I don't know Canvas is the entire learning management system, because I think each system has certain benefits for certain groups, but another one, a specific one would be like Seesaw for the early L kids. That, I don't know how we're going to get away from that. They've really been using it. It's great for kids, but it costs a lot. So
yeah, that certainly could be one. That one is already being adopted in a lot of our districts where they bought the, I wouldn't say a lot, but a number of our districts have purchased the school version of that. So,
and then today too, we talked about it like Curriculum Crafter. If that's, Dave, what you're piloting with, I forget, two districts, whatever that is, that'd be nice too, because that's another expensive type of program that if we wanted to, because we'd love to put our curriculum somewhere that's more permanent and public. Like if you go to Ann Arbor, they use it and they post all their curriculum on their websites. You can't really, you could do it with a Google Doc, but it's not as clean and clear for parents or students looking at that. So those are the types of things, I guess, just to keep in mind as we're moving forward and we're trying new things, keep everybody in the loop. And if there's buying power and we're interested, that I think would help.
well, I think you started some good conversation here to talk about what are some of the programs that we might find others that want to buy, and then we could approach them and say, you know, could we get a volume consortium discount?
Yeah, I think that, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that document Andy has is a good starting point to look at what anything that's in common in the county, and see what we can look at in terms of, I mean, we can approach any company and say, what can you do pricing wise if we get a consortium of people together to do this? We've done it before on Edmentums and E2020, that type of stuff. I mean, we've done it many times. And then I think it's a great way to use the power of all the local districts in our county to get some better pricing on stuff. So if we can get folks to just fill in everything you're using, then we can start there and look at what's common, and we can start with Seesaw or Canvas or others that there might be interest to create a county-wide contract on.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that document is there. I think everybody has access to edit it. Even if you just wanted to start throwing some things in there just off of the top of your head, not even that you're necessarily want to collaborate on, but like just what are some of these things that we're subscribing to that, and we're just kind of just wanted to start that process and start thinking about that. And that can be something that we could continue to discuss as interest develops. So
I would even include, if you think of it, things like NWA, iReady, Performance Matters, like we just saw today, that stuff, there's, 5-6 districts using that. Why don't we ask the company, hey, let's get better pricing on this as a group, that type of stuff would be great too, I think.
I do recall a few years ago, we created a spreadsheet with some of that information in it. I don't know where that is at the moment, but.
We have a spreadsheet of assessments across the county. It's all encompassing. It's pretty large,
Okay,
but that might be a starting point.
Thank you.
All right, so I would like to thank everybody that presented again today, and then of course, everybody that participated in the conversations. This wasn't necessarily the template of how we want to move forward with our curriculum director meetings. It was really kind of just our reset to try to get back and focused on that curriculum instruction and assessment. And our planning team always is looking for input on moving forward. So our next meeting in February is actually our next combined meeting with the special ed directors to continue our graduation and dropout conversation. So we will have about an hour together with curriculum directors. Next time, we'll probably do some updates. Hopefully Chris Glass can rejoin us at that point. And then we're going to have our combined meeting with special education directors. So one last
Can
thing
I
to
say
think
one
about.
thing real quick?
Yes.
If you guys mentioned at the last time we got together that you wanted maybe high school principals or counselors there, if you would like to invite them to that, you're welcome to, but can you let Dave or I know that, just because with COVID, we want to plan on numbers and have a plan for that.
Thanks, Megan. And
Thank
we
you.
will send a follow-up communication also to remind everybody about that. So we'd love to have more people there. That was a big piece of feedback from the last one, was this would be great to have our counselors or secondary principals for. And so we want to give you that space to do that. And we have the physical space to do it. So we just need a plan for numbers. So we'll send a communication about that. All right, on that note, Randy, go ahead.
I just have one more announcement and then we can take off. Want to let you, for those that are still remaining on the call, John Kraus has been reassigned to some special project for the ISD and is no longer leading the IS department. And so anything for the department in itself can come through me. I'll be leading that department through the rest of the school year at least. And then we'll see where it leads from there. So just if you have connections or needs, just please contact me. Thank you.
All right, we're going to end right on time, 11:30. Everybody have a great rest of the day.
All done. Perfect.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody.
You got it.
Thank you.